The children wake up in the night, and what we find is that when we do take a history of what's happening, of looking at that 24 hours, is a lot of the association is to do with that bedtime routine. So we would normally say, do the bedtime routine for the first week and just carry on what you were doing as normal during that night, because a lot of people try and tackle the nighttime, the bedtime and the daytime all at once, and that's just not going to work. It's just going to be too confusing for the parent and too confusing for the child. So we would normally be saying, if you're going to do this over a period of, say, 4 weeks, that you do a week of the night time and continue that night time over 4 weeks, depending where your start point was. But on week 2, start looking at your wakeful times. And that's where the sleep diaries are so brilliant, because you'd hopefully have kept a diary for the last sort of week and looking at where they are. And because your sleep cycle is normally their sleep cycles are 90 minutes, you're looking at the fact that you could probably pinpoint it to every hour and a half to 3 hours. What we'd be saying is, when they're waking in the night, and if it's every hour and a half, to do what you were doing at bedtime, which would either be if you're at the stage where you're putting the hand on them and reassuring them, then we'd say start doing that. If they were feeding a lot, and you wanted to reduce your feed, depending on how they were feeding. So say if they were formula fed, we would say measure that formula and then reduce it. Some people would say every night, some people would rather go every other night. So if it's every night, reduce it by 15 mils. If it's every other night, reduce it by 30 mils, until you get right down to about 60 mils. And then you could actually stop, because what the child's not going to do then is not going to be hungry and not going to wake because of the hunger. If you were breastfeeding, it would be to time that breastfeed and then reduce it by 30 seconds every other night. So, and reduce it again until you get down to about 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes, and then the child shouldn't want to wait. Because it's very gradual, you find that because you're getting the bedtime routine sorted, what's happening is the baby or the child will start to have the association, lose that sleep association, and start to be able to develop those strategies themselves to be able to get themselves back to sleep without the intervention of anybody. If you're offering sort of full feeds, it would probably realistically at that level take about 10 to 14 days to stop that feed. And it's about being consistent. Children will go through phases where they will wake up for no reason at all, and it might be illness, it might be something that's happened, and it might be the fact that it was a weekend. I actually say, it's about just going with it and relaxing into it and not to be too stressed about it. Being aware that if you thought, oh, we can do this in 4 weeks, and you could possibly do it all in 4 weeks, but actually it's taken into account that you may have to take a step back to where you were if there was illness or other things going on. If somebody's feeding, 8 times in a night, what we would look at to begin with is stretching those feeds out. So looking at the times of the feed, so say if the first feed was at 10 o'clock and there was another one at 11 o'clock, we'd be saying, okay, let's stretch this out, go stretch it out for an hour and a half. So already you've cut 8 feeds down to 6 by doing that, or 8 feeds down to 5. Because if they're feeding a lot, you don't want to start reducing all those feeds, because actually a 1-year-old actually doesn't need actually feeding 8 times in the night. So it's working with what you've got. But there's 3 things that you could do. You can space the feeds, you can reduce the volume of the formula, or you can reduce the timing of the breastfeeds.